Well, everyone, it's time for us to go and take a look at a very important gaming console that came out many years ago, but it's probably one of my more favorite consoles out there. It is the PlayStation 4, and honestly, this is still a very good console. Now, I think some of you may remember this, but when 2020, when the next generation of consoles came out, I kind of stated during that time that these consoles, the PlayStation 4 generations, the 4, the Slim, and the Pro, these consoles are going to last way longer than a lot of people may actually think. And I don't know if I was right, but I definitely wasn't wrong. When you look at something like the PlayStation 5 right now, although they are way more available, I still look at these consoles like the PlayStation 4s as being very reliable, is maybe not the best word, but very stable consoles for the most part that can still play a bunch of games, and maybe they don't play them at the high speeds, but they still have the ability of playing a bunch of games out there, which is amazing. So if you want to go and buy a PlayStation 4, maybe like some other consoles, I'll leave them linked down in the description. So you can get them from there and you can help support the channel at the same time. Now, starting off with the PlayStation 4, this was definitely a bigger console, but I feel like the original Xbox One was also a big console, and you could even make the argument that Nintendo Wii with its like hybrid approach kind of was a bigger type of console too, if you kind of want to go there. So this generation really wasn't, I don't think, focusing on making the best beautiful looking consoles. I think they were just making something that was powerful, and it just looked different than their previous generation, kind of. So with the PlayStation 4 on the front, you were getting a very good design. So if you look at the top, it's like top portion was glass, the bottom portion was just charcoal type of matte texture. And I think this thing looks really nice. I think it looks beautiful for the most part. And coming from the PlayStation 3, you can see how there's a lot of overlap, but you can also see how there's a lot of differences as well. This thing's way more blocky. And even the PlayStation 5 looks nothing like we've seen PlayStation kind of do before. And I would kind of make the argument the PlayStation 5 almost to me looks more like a PlayStation 1 than something like a PlayStation 4 or PlayStation 3. So I like how the PlayStation 4 was looking very different, and I think that is a kind of a highlight with this type of console. Now looking at it on the front, this thing looks like a mean machine. And that's something I love about this console. It looks basically serious as it can be. It doesn't look like a fun little happy, like, oh, come play like with little games here. This thing just tells you to go ahead and start gaming on it as soon as you buy it. And I think that in and of itself is another really cool thing that, Sony did with this specific console. You had the USB Type A ports on the front of this console, which was great. And you also had the rest of the body, which I think looked pretty good as well. I mean, you had the power button on the front. One thing I didn't like from some of these consoles was that a lot of the things were kind of digital. There was a disc tray, but it didn't really pop out. It just kind of like the CD just kind of popped out on the front. But I think nonetheless, it was a pretty cool design. You had the little sides of it, which was nice. And on the back, you had the port selection, which I think was pretty good. You had a good amount of ports on this console. One thing that I actually liked though about the Xboxes during this time was that they actually did have 2 HDMI ports. I thought that was really cool and a really nice touch that Microsoft put inside of their Xboxes. With the PlayStation 4s, I think with these consoles, the port selection is pretty wild. Like you were getting a pretty good amount of ports on this thing. So for starters, you're getting an AC adapter so you can power this thing on. You're getting that standard HDMI port, you're getting an Ethernet port, and you're getting a display port and or accessory port. You definitely have like a few more ports on the back, which is pretty nice. It's not the most amount of ports in the world, but it's a good amount that you can go and kind of do things with, which is kind of cool in and of itself. So from that perspective on the outside, I think this console still looks pretty good. It may not be like the best looking thing of all time to some people, but I do think, again, what Sony was trying to do, they're trying to make it look different than the previous generation, which is very common with a lot of, manufacturers out there. So I don't think there's a lot to complain about, from that perspective in my standpoint. But we can't talk about this console without talking about the controller. And the controller was a pretty big departure coming from the predecessor as well. Now, I will say the PS4 controller still holds up very decently. Whenever I go and usually play some sort of like game on a PC or whatever, I used to use the PlayStation 4 controller a lot, but now that the PS5s came out, I've been pretty much using the PS5 controller. And I will say one of the things I always liked about Sony's controllers, especially with the PS4 and with the PS2 controller, and even with the PS3 controller, they usually always come with batteries. So you have a rechargeable battery inside. You don't have to worry about getting AA batteries or buying an extra charging battery case. It's all built in, and that's something I really do like about these types of consoles. Although it wouldn't be like the main reason that a lot of people would go and buy a PlayStation 5 or PlayStation 4 now, it's really nice that you have a chargeable controller like that without having to buy any accessories. I think that in and of itself is a really nice touch. But the controller also has some sort of like touchpad on the top, which is always very funny to me. I still don't think Sony's really like implemented that well enough for people to use it like on an everyday basis. So like even on a lot of games, like I feel like we're just kind of like going around and using it. I don't really think a lot of people are using it basically to actually go ahead and get a full experience in their game or something like that, if that makes any sense. So, although again, it's not the biggest deal in the world, I do feel like Sony could do a little bit of a better job in that standpoint. But I think regardless, they did a good job anyway, and I think that, in and of itself is a good thing for the controller. Now, going on with the game selection of this console, there are still so many games that you can play on your PlayStation 4, it's not even funny. And that has been something I've said time and time and time again with this type of console. When you're getting something like a PlayStation 4, there's still lots of games that you can play on this console. For one, you have all those games that came on the discs, so you have the disc tray still on this console. It's not like a PlayStation 5 digital or anything like that, so you still have that type of capability here where you can actually go ahead and play a bunch of those games. I mean, this thing's backwards compatible too, so you have a massive amount of games you can play on this type of console, which I think in and of itself is really cool. But on top of that, you have a bunch of games that have already came out and may still be coming out. A lot of game developers, you'd be surprised, know how many people are using a PlayStation 4, and they are not about to go ahead and just remove a humongous demographic of being able to play their specific games. So they're not going to go and make a game only for the PlayStation 4 because they're not going to make a game only for the PlayStation 5 either, because they know there's a big demographic on both platforms. So they're going to make the same game on both platforms because it's probably so easy to port them over. They just have to downscale the graphics a little bit, and that's pretty much all they're going to have to do. And I think that is an amazing approach these game manufacturers are doing. So I say that to say, if you were still somebody right now who is planning, or you have a PlayStation 4 and you plan on upgrading to the PlayStation 5 right now because you do kind of feel like it's a way better console and you're missing out on a lot, for one, it is a better console for sure. I'm not about to sit here and say it's not a better console. It definitely is for sure, but it's not a console where like you're going to upgrade to it and you're automatically going to be getting an insane increase in whatever. The same games can probably be played on both consoles unless there's like a unique one or like a system only, like you have to have the newest generation to do it. I think for a lot of people out there, you might see that with a console like a PlayStation 4, you can still get a lot of capability from that type of device, which is amazing. So I say that to say, at the end of the day, the PlayStation 4 I think is still completely worth it. I think it's still a very good console for sure, but I do think there could potentially be better consoles out there. But I do think that, if you're in the market and you have all the money in the world, a lot of the PlayStation 5s are available now for a lot of people to buy, so you can easily just go ahead and pick them up if you want to. So those consoles have gotten a lot easier to pick up, making them kind of better deals in some areas. So if you're in that type of ballpark, you may want to go ahead and see if you can actually swing for something like a PlayStation 5, but I wouldn't go out of my way if I had a PlayStation 4 for a PlayStation 5. If I couldn't afford it, or if it was way too expensive or something like that, it probably would just make way more sense to go ahead and just keep your PlayStation 4, and or if you don't even have a PlayStation 4, going up to something like a PlayStation 4 Pro or PlayStation 4 Slim, those could be pretty decent options as well. So that might be something you want to take a look at too. So in terms of that, that's kind of how the PlayStation 4 holds up in 2023. If you have any other thoughts or questions, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.